So in this segment, we're going to be discussing what I think is Sunak's biggest problem, which is his inability to handle, interviews and questions well, and his reliance on talking points, which gets more and more embarrassing the more under pressure he goes under. So this interview is Beth Rigby. He asks him a basic question of, how do you feel when you lose? And he just fumbles completely. He fumbles completely on this one and a different interview.
You're one of life's success stories. You were head boy at school, you had a career in finance that made you very wealthy. Now you're Prime Minister. How do you feel when you lose?
Sorry?
How do you feel when you lose?
How do you mean, Beth?
I would have asked him, how do you deal with failure? But I don't think it's the worst question in the world.
Well, you're a winner in life. How do you feel when you don't win?
Well, look, my focus in this job is to deliver for the country. I've set out 5 very clear priorities: to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop the votes. All I'm doing every day is focus on delivering for people against those 5 priorities. I firmly believe that that's what the country wants me to do. That's what the government is committed to doing, and we're working night and day to make sure that that happens.
And you lost to Liz Truss last year. Did that hurt more or less than losing over 1,000 council seats at your first test at the ballot box?
That's a big burn there, that he lost to Liz Truss, which was embarrassing. I don't fully blame him for that one. But for the other stuff, like the council seats and stuff, that's a burn. Losing to Liz Truss, who lost to a lettuce, is a burn. But let's see what he goes back to.
Always disappointing to lose hard-working councillors, but the message I've taken is the country wants me to redouble our efforts to deliver for them. As I said, the 5 priorities I've set out, I believe, are the right ones: to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop the votes. That's what the country wants us to focus on. That's what I am focusing on day and night, and I will keep at it.
He circles back to his talking points. He was asked, how do you do with failure? And he goes, well, that's why I want to redouble our efforts to live on his 5 pledges. And that's one thing the Tories do well. They'll bash you over the head with their election pledges and things like that.
You're quite gutted.
As I said, it is disappointing to lose hard-working Conservative councillors. Many of them are friends and colleagues as well. But I'm going to work very hard to deliver for the country, and again, the 5 priorities I've set out, I believe, are the right ones. Those are the country's priorities: to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop the votes. Day and night, that's what I'm focused on. That's what the government's focused on.
So yeah, enough of that. So what he does is he does what politicians are meant to, which is he's meant to bash you over the head with his kind of policies and things like that, right? But the problem is he does it in a very clumsy way, especially when he's asked a very easy and humanising question by Beth Rigby, when in my opinion Sunak does appear out of touch. He's a billionaire, let's be honest. Instead of taking the train, he flew down to Southampton at taxpayers' expense, stuff like that. So in my opinion, he does appear out of touch. And when asked questions like, how do you deal with losing or failure, I think these are easy questions to kind of answer. He could talk about what his process for kind of decompressing and analysing where things gone wrong, and instead he kind of defaults back to his 5 pledges. And this clip here is even worse, to be honest with you. And this from Politics UK, citing Sky News here. God damn, this is painful.
Sure that whatever lessons there are to be learned are learned, and we do that in a spirit of transparency and candour. The government has cooperated with the inquiry. Tens of thousands of documents have been handed over. And with regard to the specific question at the moment, the government's carefully considering its position, but it's confident in the approach that it's taken.
Are you prepared to get into a legal battle with a public inquiry? Some senior legal figures think you'll lose that fight.
Again, not going to comment on the speculation, but we are carefully considering next steps, and the government is confident in its position.
He said the same thing. He goes back to his same talking point, and he looks incredibly uncomfortable here.
You're saying that it should be up to ministers to decide what documents are looked at by the inquiry, not the independent judge in charge of it?
Again, government's handed over tens and tens of thousands of documents in a spirit of candour and transparency, because it is important that we learn the lessons of COVID. With regard to the particular question at the moment, we're carefully considering next steps, but the government is confident in its position.
So you might not hand over that material that they're asking for then?
Again, as I said, government is considering next steps carefully, but has been confident in its position, has handed over tens of thousands of documents.
So he's constantly going back to the same talking point, and it reminds me of this, probably one of my favourite clips of all time. And yeah, I'll play it as often as I get given the opportunity to. So here we go to Marco Rubio and Chris Christie.
We don't need to add to it by electing someone who has experience at running up and destroying the credit rating of his state.
So that's an attack on Chris Christie there, which is fine. And then he defaults to his talking point.
But I would add this: let's dispel with this fiction that Barack Obama doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. He is trying to change this country. He wants America to become more like the rest of the world. We don't want to be like the rest of the world. We want to be the United States of America. And when I'm elected president, this will become once again the single greatest nation in the history of the world, not the disaster Barack Obama has imposed upon us.
You see, everybody, I want the people at home to think about this. That's what Washington, D.C. does. The drive-by shot at the beginning with incorrect and incomplete information, and then the memorized 25-second speech that is exactly what his advisors gave him.
And then Chris Christie kind of just takes them apart there. And that's what I want to see kind of the media do a bit more of. And this is what I want to see Labour and the opposition parties do more of. Just pick apart their nonsense talking points and just attack them for it, saying you've got no answers, all you have is this. And, you know, this comment here, I've just seen it, which is, I'm back 4 years later. I'm disgusted to learn that nobody has dispelled this fiction that Obama doesn't know what he's doing. Honestly, what a goated comment. But that's my point here. You know, when he goes back to talking points, it's embarrassing. You can see Rubio's kind of face. He glitches, he pauses, and he goes back to his talking point because that's what's been drilled in. And so for Sunak here, over this talk about the COVID inquiry, he goes, quote, "We've handed over the 10,000 documents," end quote, says that 4 times. "We'll do it in the spirit of transparency and candor," 5 times. "We are confident in our position," 4 times. "We are considering our position," 4 times. And that's the point here. He looks incredibly uncomfortable here in this interview because he's dealing with decent questioning from the Sky News journalist and he has no actual answer. So all he does is go back to talking points, and he just looks like a guy who's glitching because he doesn't know how to phrase it in such a way where it doesn't look like he's going back to his talking points. It's just embarrassing. And this will be, I think, Sunak's biggest problem in the run-up to a general election, that they'll ramp up the questioning on him and he's going to struggle to give answers, especially because he's failing on his 5 pledges. He's already failed on the waiting list and he'll continue to fail on other things. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.